Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to get into the incredible story of how the feeling of nationalism, was born in India. It's a story that comes from decades of struggle, of unity, and, just this unbreakable hope for freedom. Just let that sink in for a second. Some stranger in your house telling you how to live, taking what's yours, that feeling of anger, of injustice, well, that's pretty much exactly how millions of Indians started to feel under British rule. If you can get your head around that one idea, it's the key to understanding everything else we're going to talk about. And that feeling, it has a name: nationalism. It's this really deep love for your country, a powerful desire for it to be free, to be yours again. This is the very emotion that started to spread all across India, bringing so many different people together to face one common problem.
So let's really set the stage here. What was it actually like, living in that house, controlled by a stranger? What were the conditions on the ground that planted the very first seeds of this powerful nationalist movement?
I mean, just look at this. The oppression was systematic, it was everywhere. It wasn't just one bad thing. You had farmers being absolutely crushed by impossible taxes. You had local Indian industries basically being torn down so that people had no choice but to buy expensive British stuff. But, maybe the worst part was just the daily humiliation of being treated like you were less than, a second-class citizen in your own country. This wasn't just about money, it was about dignity.
So this widespread unhappiness, it can bubble under the surface for a long, long time. But then a few things happened, one right after the other, that turned all that quiet frustration into a roaring fire. It was a movement that was finally demanding change. This was the breaking point. Look at how quickly things fell apart. First, World War I. Indians were promised more rights for their incredible sacrifice, but what they got was the opposite: higher taxes, higher prices, more hardship. Then, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, the British passed the Rowlatt Act, which basically stripped away basic human rights. And then, the ultimate tragedy: the massacre at Jallianwala Bagh, a horrific, cold-blooded attack on innocent, unarmed people who were just protesting peacefully. After Jallianwala Bagh, this thought was no longer just a suspicion. For so many people, it was now a proven, undeniable fact. This one horrific event really woke up the entire nation and made that call for freedom louder and more urgent than it had ever been before. So the anger was there. The burning desire for change was there. But here's the question: how could a population without an army fight back against the most powerful empire in the world? Well, the movement needed a totally new strategy, a new way to fight. And it came from a person who would absolutely change the course of history: Mahatma Gandhi. This was Gandhi's revolutionary idea. He brought in two concepts: Satya, which means truth, and Ahimsa, or nonviolence. His whole method, which he called Satyagraha, was all about peaceful but firm protest. He basically argued that you could fight evil without being evil yourself. Now, this wasn't weakness. It was an incredibly active moral strategy. The whole point was to shine a bright light on the injustice of the British and win the moral high ground for the whole world to see. And this is just a brilliant illustration of his strategy in action. The non-cooperation movement in 1920 was this massive, nationwide plan to peacefully grind the British administration to a stop. First, students and lawyers and doctors, they all boycotted British institutions. Then, people stopped buying foreign goods, even burning them in these huge bonfires and wearing Indian-made cloth called khadi instead. It was, at its heart, a total refusal to cooperate on any level. For the very first time, the entire country was moving together with one purpose. But then came a huge test of that principle. At a place called Chauri Chaura, a protest turned violent. And instead of just letting it go, Gandhiji did something pretty incredible. He stopped the entire national movement. He was devastated. See, for him, the way you got your freedom was just as important as freedom itself. It was a really tough lesson for everyone, but it just proved how serious his commitment to nonviolence really was. That absolute commitment to peaceful protest led to the next great moment: the Dandi March. And this was just genius. The British had a tax on salt, a basic need for every single person, whether you were rich or poor. So by walking 240 kilometers to the sea just to make his own salt, Gandhi picked a symbol that every single Indian could understand and feel in their gut. This one simple act launched the huge civil disobedience movement, and soon people all over India were peacefully breaking laws. It just spread like wildfire. So the movement was just exploding, right? It was reaching even the smallest villages. But who exactly was getting involved? We're not just talking about politicians and famous thinkers here.
Nationalism had truly become a mass movement, and it was pulling in people from every single walk of life.
And this slide really shows us why. Everybody had their own personal reasons for joining, but they were all united under this bigger goal of freedom. You had peasants who just wanted relief from those crushing taxes. You had city workers demanding fair wages. Businessmen were tired of the restrictive British economic rules. And, so importantly, women came out of their homes in huge numbers to march and protest. Every group realized that their own personal freedom was tied directly to the nation's freedom.
It's a really powerful picture of unity. But we have to ask a tougher question. In a country as incredibly diverse as India, was that unity perfect? Did every single group feel like their voice was being heard in the same way?
And, well, the honest answer is no. While nationalism is like a powerful glue holding people together, it couldn't perfectly seal every single crack. The reality on the ground was a lot more complex, and it's really important we understand the limits of this unity. So for instance, leaders from the Dalit communities, who represented some of the most oppressed people in society, they were worried that independence would just mean swapping one group of rulers for another. They fought for their own separate political rights to make sure their voices would be heard. And in a similar way, many Muslim leaders were concerned that their community could get sidelined in a Hindu-majority India, so they demanded their own protections. The road to becoming one single nation, it was not simple.
But even with these internal challenges, the overall momentum that pushed toward freedom was just unstoppable. And a huge part of that was fueled not just by protests, but by culture, by art and songs and symbols that helped create a shared national identity.
Now this is fascinating. The idea of India itself was personified as Bharat Mata, or Mother India, a figure that everyone could have this deep, emotional connection to. Songs like Vande Mataram basically became anthems for the movement. Old folk tales were retold to remind people of a shared, proud history. And symbols like the national flag gave people something real, something tangible to rally around. Culture was really the heart of the movement, building this sense of family among millions of strangers.
And so, after decades of struggle, a protest and sacrifice, and powered by that unwavering nationalist feeling, the goal was finally achieved. In 1947, India became free.
So, if there's one thing to take away, it's this. Indian nationalism was a journey. It started with the pain of being oppressed, it was shaped in the fire of protest, it was guided by this incredible philosophy of nonviolence, and in the end, it was cemented by a shared love for the motherland. It was truly a victory that was won together.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Winning freedom was one massive, incredible challenge. But the job of keeping a diverse nation of over 1 billion people united, well, that's an ongoing challenge, isn't it? So what do you think holds a nation together today? What are the new ideas, the new symbols, the new struggles that bind people? Something to chew on. Thanks so much for listening.